does Jerry need to do about players kneeling?
Well, the first thing that he needs to do is recognize the fact publicly, not just privately, that he has young men on his squad. And young men have a right to feel the way that they want to feel, particularly when they come from a community that Jerry Jones neither comes from nor relates to. That's important. The other side of it is that he needs to mind his business and step aside. And what I mean by that is very, very simple. Jerry Jones, what people need to understand about Jerry Jones is that Jerry Jones, being a white billionaire from Arkansas, has every right to feel the way that he feels, whatever that feeling may be. No, Colin Kaepernick kneeling was not disrespectful to the flag. It had nothing to do with patriotism. He was challenging our nation to live up to what it says it is all about. He was trying to address racial inequality, racial oppression, police brutality, all of those different things. It wasn't about disrespecting the flag. It would be nice if Jerry Jones articulated that position, but if Jerry Jones feels otherwise, and that's his level of understanding, and that's what he wants to embrace, ladies and gentlemen, he has a right to feel whatever it is that he wants to feel. What I don't believe Jerry Jones has never had the right to feel, nor do I feel he has the right to do, or rather actually do, nor do I feel he has the right to do now, is basically impose his will upon his players to the degree that he did, telling them what they would do and what they wouldn't do, telling them how things would be interpreted no matter what. I thought was always wrong on his part. You can sit up there and say, as the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, this is not your belief system. This is not where it lies. You could also have meetings with players and say, look, y'all, you affect my bottom line. I'm going to act a little differently towards you because I want to make this money. What you have no right to do is say, this is what something means to me. Therefore, that's what it's going to mean to you. And you will act accordingly or else. That came across incredibly wrong, and it had levels of connotations that I don't even want to bring up on this show at this particular moment in time, and that is where I think that Jerry Jones ran awry. And then when the whole George Floyd killing took place and there was an APB out for Jerry Jones because we couldn't find him anywhere, and then when he finally showed his face a couple of months later and talked about grace, dancing in a way we've never seen Jerry Jones dance in his career as owner of the Dallas Cowboys, it was very disheartening to see that because there was no definitive finite position. In the end, I reiterate my original point. Jerry Jones has the right to feel what he feels. What he doesn't have the right to do is to tell other players how they should feel and how they should act about things that are going on in their community and where they come from. That is where he crossed the line. And as long as he doesn't do that this time around, I'm cool with it.
I agree with what you said, Stephen A. We're on a debate show, but sometimes with these issues, we're just going to agree. But I'd like to say some more about it. I think the key is, obviously, no one can tell anyone else how to feel, but how to act is something different. No, he can't tell them how to act. The question is, can they tell him how to act? And I think the answer is more of a yes than you might think. Jerry Jones, through one of his companies, donated $1 million to Trump's election campaign. Now, this predates Trump saying the things he said about NFL players when they were kneeling. So it's not like you can take it back at that point. But he was asked not that long ago during an owners meeting why he supports Republican candidates. And that means financially, not just the way he feels, but what he does. And many of these candidates are hostile toward the aims of the group of people who would say Black Lives Matter. Let's make a distinction between Black Lives Matter as an organization and Black Lives Matter as a theme. And he supports politicians who are hostile towards the aims of people who feel that Black lives do matter. And that is something legitimate for players to say, wait a minute, is your discussing how you want us to behave an extension, essentially, of your political contributions? I mean, even if you do it as a private citizen, that reflects, ostensibly, the way you feel about things. Now, Jerry Jones may think, look, I'm not talking about these social issues. They're just not, those social issues won't be defining for me. I like these candidates for a host of other issues. And that's his right, sure. And these things are up to the individual. However, his team would also be right in saying, well, we understand that you aren't going to make these issues that are important to us defining for you in terms of the way you behave, but they will be defining for us in terms of the way we behave. And not only do I think that Jerry Jones shouldn't, and probably is not allowed, but certainly shouldn't, try to pressure the players to behave the way he wants with respect to these issues, Stephen A. Not just think, but behave. I think the players actually, in this respect, could and should probably apply pressure to Jerry Jones to modify his behavior. After all, these social issues are defining for many of these players in terms of their disposition towards people who actually affect policy.
Listen, Stephen A. and I have talked about Jerry Jones this offseason. We had an opportunity to do it on Get Up, and I said I wasn't looking forward to hearing for Jerry Jones. I also said I wasn't asking to hear from Jerry Jones because I always knew where Jerry Jones stood, and this is just another example of that. Stephen A. put it perfectly. He's been tap dancing ever since he started to speak again after the George Floyd incident and some of the protests that have taken place, and also some of the changes that we've seen from other NFL owners. From the NFL itself, Jerry Jones was hard to find, but he wasn't hard to figure out where he thought and where he felt that this thing was going. See, the difference between 2016 and 2017, when Jerry Jones was speaking, when Jerry Jones was loud, was that society was different. See, society at that time felt an empowerment on the opposite side of Black Lives Matter, on the opposite sides of social injustice. And so that was the very vocal voice of the country. That voice has changed. And when that voice changed and Jerry Jones did not change, he understood, you know what, this time I have to be a little more quiet.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.